I'm in Prospect Park in Brooklyn, New York. Right behind me, beyond this fountain, are people who've come to protest genetic engineering. They don't understand how the FDA has been leading a campaign to convince the American public and the State Department that around the world that genetic engineering is safe, it's what will help feed the world's hungry, and organic is not important, but genetic engineering is. Well, there's a lot of people who take issue with that, including Dr. Jeffrey Smith, Professor Vandana Shiva, many people you're going to hear from.
Genetic engineering is a process where scientists take genes from one species and force it into the DNA of other species. Now, the process itself creates massive collateral damage in the plant or animal, but they don't test for those changes and the side effects before they introduce, say, the crop into our food supply. But over time, even though there's been very little study on the health dangers, there's been sufficient evidence of harm to cause the American Academy of Environmental Medicine to say all doctors should prescribe non-GMO diets to everyone. They say that the animal feeding studies link GMOs to reproductive problems, immune system problems, accelerated aging, organ damage, gastrointestinal distress, dysfunctional regulation of cholesterol and insulin, to name a few. Let's take one category of problems, reproductive problems, and see what evidence is there. When genetically modified soybeans were fed to rodents, mice, rats, or hamsters, we've seen changes in the testicles, testicles changing from pink to blue, changes in the sperm cells, changes in the uterus and ovaries, changes in the DNA functioning of the embryo offspring when the mother mice was fed GM soy compared to non-GM soy. We've seen smaller babies, a death rate that's 5 times that compared to controls. Sterile babies, even babies with hair growing in their mouths. And this has been done by government scientists as well as independent scientists who are at the top of their field. Now, the response by the biotech industry to each of these is either to ignore it, deny it, or distort it, and to attack, whenever they can, the scientists who did the research.
The body is very, very smart. The body is very, very simple. It understands food. It doesn't understand chemicals. It doesn't understand the pesticides that are routinely, every week we open up a journal, every week we see in the news that there are more and more pesticides that are being proven to be damaging to our body. When we understand what a genetically modified organism is, that is a corn or a soy or any of the other genetically modified foods, that those pesticides have been spliced into the genes. When we look at diseases like cancer, when we look at autoimmune diseases where the body is attacking itself, and we say, gee, what could be causing this? What's causing this is that the body is not getting things that it recognizes. The body is overwhelmed.
There's actually been a global agreement. The UN Food Safety Standards Setting Organization that's jointly run by the World Health Organization and the Food and Agriculture Organization, that's called Codex Alimentarius. They have actually, there was an 8-year process where all the countries in the world came together and talked about whether there should be safety assessments for genetically engineered crops, genetically engineered animals, and genetically engineered microorganisms. We actually, Consumers Union is part of a global network of consumer organizations. We've got 250 member organizations in 110 countries. We went to all these meetings over 8 years, and there's now global agreement that there should be required safety testing for these crops before they come on the market. And you know what? The U.S. does not require that.
No one, not a single human being on earth, gets up and says, boy, I can't wait to go to the supermarket and buy a GMO food. And why is that? That's because after 30 years and hundreds of billions of dollars of public and private investment, they haven't been able to come up with one thing in this food that actually helps the consumer. No better taste, no lower price, no more nutrition, nothing, zip, zero, nada.
I'm standing between the White House and Lafayette Park, where thousands of individuals have come from around the United States to offer a voice of challenge to the FDA. The Obama administration promised when they came into office that it wouldn't be business as usual, and yet it's business as usual. Individuals are also here to protest the FDA's support of genetic engineering, but has said nothing in support of organic and sustainable agriculture. We'll be talking with individuals about their concerns.
In the case of genetically engineered foods, it was really the biotech industry that forced the approval with very little scientific oversight. The 1992 policy of the FDA claims that the agency is not aware of any information showing that GMOs are significantly different. And on the basis of that sentence, they said no testing was necessary, no labeling was necessary, and companies like Monsanto, that makes most of the genetically modified food products, they can determine if their genetically modified foods are safe. Monsanto is the company that told us that PCBs were safe, even though they were convicted of actually poisoning people in their town next to the PCB factory and fined $700 million. They told us that Agent Orange was safe. They told us that DDT was safe, and now they're in charge of telling us if their own genetically modified foods are safe. Because the FDA doesn't require a single safety study, they leave it to Monsanto. Now, why did the FDA abdicate their responsibility to protect us? Well, the White House had instructed the FDA to promote biotechnology under the first Bush administration. And so the FDA created a new position for Michael Taylor, Monsanto's former attorney. So Michael Taylor was in charge of policy at the FDA when this GMO policy was created, and then he became Monsanto's vice president, and under the Obama administration was put back in the FDA as the U.S. food safety czar. But documents made public from a lawsuit 7 years after the policy was enacted showed that the policy was based on a lie. In reality, the overwhelming consensus among the scientists at the FDA were not only that GMOs were different, but that they were inherently dangerous, that they might create allergies, toxins, new diseases, and nutritional problems. They had urged their superiors to require long-term study, and when they saw drafts of the policy coming back to them, they were angry and urged their political appointees to change course. But Michael Taylor and the political appointees ignored the science, ignored the scientists, denied the existence of their concerns, and set forth a policy that allowed GMOs to be put on the market in a way that creates unprecedented risk for human beings and the environment. You see, GMOs are the product of an infant science, and now we are feeding that product to the entire population. And it's known to create unpredicted side effects, and no one is testing to see if the rise in all these diseases since GMOs were introduced in the mid-90s is caused or promoted by these GMOs. Furthermore, if you release the GMOs into the environment, as they have for years, they cross-pollinate, they mix. And so they spread self-propagating pollution in the gene pool. And so we are now putting genes into the environment that can outlast the effects of global warming and nuclear waste. So we should have put the brakes on and not allowed any GMO in the food supply or in the environment until all doubts had been extinguished. But if you look at the actual FDA files, all they had was doubts. But they were extinguished for political purposes.
All we want's a simple label
for the food that's on our table.
For the food that's on our table.
OMG!
OMG!
GMOs!
GMOs!
OMG!
OMG!
GMOs!
GMOs! These GMOs have got to go!
These GMOs have got to go!
These GMOs have got to go!
These GMOs have got to go! We have got a right to know!
We have got a right to know!
If our food has GMOs!
If our food has GMOs!
You have got a right to know!
And genetic engineering of food generally means one of two things. Either it's been engineered to withstand high doses of weed killer, so there's more weed killer residues in our food, or there's been insecticides that's been engineered to be expressed in every single cell of a crop, such as BT corn. And the FDA is basically you know, a classic example of revolving door regulatory capture, where they handpick appointees of the industry, the biotech industry, which is basically the pesticide industry, which is bought the seed industry, which is engineering resistance to its pesticides so that they can sell both the seeds and then the pesticides. Basically, it's their people. They bought up both parties. They get their handpicked people in FDA, EPA, USDA, and give them a green light and a free pass to market and peddle these unproven, they've not been proven safe, to give them a green light into the American market. And basically, there's a huge experiment underway to see, well, what happens when a whole generation of Americans eats low doses of whatever these foreign insecticidal compounds are, or compounds that enable high doses of weed killer. There's this huge experiment, and we do not have the right to opt out of it. We want President Obama and his administration to uphold his promise to enact mandatory labeling of genetic engineering. Every country in Europe, Japan, over 50 countries around the world have mandatory labeling of genetic engineered foods. And this is a basic fundamental right that we as Americans have a right to know what's in our food. We have a right to know and make a choice about what we feed ourselves and our children.
We need to reorganize our food system with new priorities. Take the corporate hand out of it and put in nutrition, put in humanity, put in the ecology. Create a system of agriculture and a system of food which puts human evolution and species evolution at the most important apex, at the priority, and work from there. And what we'll find is a complete shift of the priorities for research. Right now, less than 1% of the USDA budget goes to organic agriculture research. Instead, it goes largely to support the economic interests of corporations and their high input, chemical input agriculture. What we need is for the government to step away from corporations and start creating an agricultural system that makes sense. And this is what will be sustainable, not just for the environment, but also for the American people.
My uncle was a plant geneticist. He brought us, unfortunately, the winter tomato. That was research that he did when he was back in college. So it was the most mortifying experience he's ever had to live with, was to see this escape out of the lab. So when I was a little kid, he told us this information can go very, very wrong, and you need to watch out. So for the past 40 years, that has been my focus, is watching our food and our environment, basically. I'm an environmental engineer, so it runs in the family.
This movement, our movement, your movement, is standing for real freedom and real democracy. Because if we aren't even free to decide what we'll eat, what we'll grow, to know what's in our food, how are we free in any other way? Because it's our food that shapes every cell of our body, every bit of our organs, and at least the elder women in my country say it shapes our thinking too. You eat bad food, you have bad thinking. You eat good food, your mind works fresh, creative, beautiful. Now, the denial for labeling is linked so much to the food dictatorship that Monsanto has spread. And I feel terrible that a White House with Obama is doing exactly the same thing as the White House with Bush Sr. and the White House with Bush Jr. I've just been given this wonderful t-shirt which reminds us of what President Obama said in 2007. It's from Food Democracy Now! Here's what I'll do as president. We let folks know whether their food has been genetically modified, because Americans should know what they are buying. And I would add what they're eating, because you don't just buy food, you eat it. he should be held to his promise. The argument that supports the denial of labeling was a lie created by President Bush Sr. when we managed to get the Convention on Biological Diversity through at the Earth Summit in '92, and we managed to get a biosafety protocol commitment under Article 19.3 of that convention. President Bush Sr. walked out and said, "I will not let my biotech industry be regulated." And the instrument for deregulation was a scientific lie called substantial equivalence. We will pretend GM foods are the same as organic foods and conventional foods. And therefore we will not look for safety, we will not allow regulation, and we will definitely not allow labeling. Substantial equivalence is a lie, because if the same company can claim that they've done something new and claim a patent, they can't deny that they've done something new when it's an issue of responsibility to citizens to let them know what's in that food. Whether they're antibiotic resistance markers, Bt toxin genes, viral promoters, we need to know. We have a right to know. Then another lie is it doesn't matter how food was produced. You should look at product and not at process. But we in the organic movement know it makes a difference how food is produced. That's why we have process labeling. And organic labels are there. But we also need to know what's not organic. And the moment food is genetically modified, it's not organic. The onus just can't be on the organic movement. It must be on the polluters, contaminators, and toxic drug pushers in our food system. First, they claimed they were going to feed the world, but their crops do not produce more yields. In India, they claimed 1,500 kilograms of cotton per acre. The average is 300 to 400. And we get that through organic. You don't have to contaminate your crops. They claim that we reduce chemical use. In fact, even till today, Monsanto will say this is an alternative to chemical agriculture. In India, because of Bt cotton, 13-fold increase in pesticides. In this country, 15% increase in herbicide. The only two pathetic applications Monsanto brought us in all these years: herbicide-resistant crops, Bt toxin crops. Both are about increasing toxics. One was supposed to control weeds, the other was supposed to control pests. What they've given us is super weeds, between 12 to 15 million acres of this country lost to farming because of weeds that now need Agent Orange to be sprayed. And in India and China, 12-fold increase in pests, new pests and resistant bollworm. So chemical use hasn't gone down. Instead of controlling weeds and pests, we have super weeds and super pests. And now they claim, oh, we will give you climate resilient crops to deal with climate change. No, they can't create climate resilience through genetic engineering. They just steal it from our farmers who've done this job so much better. The most significant issue is genetic engineering is linked to patents. That's the only reason they're doing it. I happened to be at a meeting in '87 where the industry said, we need patents, and the only way we'll get patents on seed is by doing genetic engineering. There is no purpose genetic engineering serves except seed monopolies. But patents mean royalties. Royalties means extracting money from farmers. 8,000% increase in seed costs in cotton in India. Increase in pesticide use. The result has been debt, and the result has been 250,000 of our farmers committing suicides. No more farm suicides, no more food dictatorship, no more toxics in our food. We are here to commit ourselves to our food democracy, our food freedom, and the celebration of life on Earth. Thank you for being here.
Haiti, after the earthquake, Monsanto donated seeds to a country that was on its knees. And do you know what happened? 10,000 peasant farmers took to the streets and said, no, we do not want your seeds. And they burned them. Dennis, I'm afraid, is having to campaign back in Ohio, otherwise he would have liked to have joined me as well. And I want to let you know, if you don't know already, we want to make the voices really heard inside the walls of Congress and also inside the White House. Now, every single year or every single Congress, Dennis introduces 3 pieces of legislation, and they're all about GMOs. Now, we need more and more people to sign on to these legislation. So there's one which is called, and I hope you'll remember this, it's called the Right to Know. And it's about labeling. So hopefully when you get back, you will contact your members of Congress, get on the phone and ask them to be original co-sponsors, because that bill has not yet been introduced. We want everybody to know about this. Now, it's great that all of us are together, but we need to make this 1 million strong, 2 million strong, 10 million strong. Everybody needs to know about the food that they're eating and what it's doing to themselves and the environment and the world. This is about social justice, economic justice, it's about health, it's about freedom, it's about liberty. So thank you for being here.
I think we got to realize it's a lot bigger issue than just the health, which there is no health issue. This one determination that this was safe, and they never looked back. But there's a lot of health questions. But this is an ethical and moral issue, and it's one that the churches are really just finally starting to wake up to. So we really need to have the right to label, and it's really time to stand up for democracy. So thank you so much.
All right, yes, get up, stand up. Stand up for your rights. Oh gosh, yes, get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Don't give it up. Get up, stand up. Stand up for your rights. Oh gosh, yes, get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Preacher man, don't tell me heaven is under the earth. I know you don't know what life is really worth. You see, all that glitters gold, half the story has never been told. Somehow you see the light. Stand up for your rights. Yeah. Get up, stand up. Be brave now. Stand up for your rights. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Say no.